All right, I think everyone's here now, so I think we're about ready to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our third annual National Survey of Women and Their Perceptions and Usage of Radio, Music, and Digital Media. Here She Comes 2012. We're excited to present over the next 4 Thursdays, including today, our findings from this massive study. So to get started here, we're going to, first of all, take a look at our purpose. And Alan, if you want to go to the next slide, because I don't have access to the keyboard. There we go. Thank you. First of all, why do we do this? What's the purpose? Well, it's twofold. First is develop proprietary information for our clients. And we do keep some of the data exclusive for the use of our clients. And then we use this to develop information for the benefit of the industry. So, what do we study? Well, we look at radio usage. We look at attitudes toward the medium. We look at radio's digital efforts and the competition in that space. We look at customized music streamers or personalizable music streamers. We're able to pull out some Arbitron responders and take a look at them specifically. We'll look at music tastes of these women, 15 to 54. And then we'll spend a lot of time focusing on radio's heaviest listeners, which, as we all know, are ultra important. And then lastly, if anyone can answer this question, what do women want? So that's what we studied, just kind of a point of interest. We looked at over 3,000 data points or questions. We looked at it in over 341 different breakouts. And so this being our largest study to date, we have over 1 million pieces of discrete data. So as we mentioned, today we're going to look at just the industry headlines. A week from today, on next Thursday, we're going to be looking at the digital battlegrounds. On July 26th, we'll look at the top 40 deep dive. And then finally, that first Thursday in August, we'll do a deep dive into AC, hot AC, and adult top 40. We'd like to thank our presenting sponsors, Triton Digital. And if you don't know, or if you have not played around with their polling engine, I highly recommend it. It's a polling engine to conduct research, so radio stations can do their own research. Matter of fact, we're going to be using it for a massive study we're going to be doing later this fall that we're going to be presenting at the NAB. So please, when you get a chance, take a look at Triton Digital. So today specifically, as I said, is industry headlines. We're going to look at who is she. We're going to look at what her radio usage is. We're going to look at her attitudes towards radio. We're going to look at the streaming and wireless competition. We'll take a quick look at HD radio. And then finally, as I mentioned before, we're going to take a look at radio's heaviest listeners. So we're going to jump in. First of all, everyone should have their little control panel on the right-hand side. As you're listening to this presentation, please, any question, comments, put it in the dialog box. We also will be monitoring Twitter at #BurnsStudy if you have any comments or feedback or questions there. And if you haven't, you can maximize your screen at top right-hand corner. You can minimize your control panel, and let's buckle in and let's get going. So here's Alan, and Alan, take it from there.
Thanks, Jeff. The sample for this study has been identically designed each of the 3 years we've done these. They're women 15 to 54, all of whom cum either AC or top 40, most of whom, 3/4 of whom cum both, and the ages are proportionate to the combined cums of the two formats. Every year has been a little bit over 2,000. We shoot for 2,000 sample and wind up a little bit over that this year, 2010. They were interviewed in May, online interviews via the National Panel of SSI, who you may recognize as having contributed, provided sample to Arbitron for many, many decades. The breakout by CUME is about 3/4 of the sample CUME Top 40 and 3/4 CUME AC, around 1,500 people, 15 to 1,600 people per format. By region, we control it so that no one region of the country has more than about 20% of the sample. This year we hit it exactly on the nose at 20% each. And those regions are made up of cities like this. All of them, by the way, are PPM markets. We try every year with these studies to, in addition to finding out how she uses radio, just find out about her. You know, radio traditionally has researched what women, how women use radio stations. What's her favorite station? What does she think about her favorite radio station? What music does she like? And we're going to look at those things. But as an industry, we don't tend to study our listeners, our consumers very much. Most industries go deeply into the psyche of their consumer when planning their products and their marketing. Radio hasn't done enough of that, so we try to bolster that knowledge by a little bit more every year. So who is she, and why do we care? Well, here's why we care. One of the statements we ask women to agree or disagree with is that there's at least one radio station around here that really, really understands me. And you see here strongly agree, somewhat agree, or strongly disagree. Look at this number here. A woman who strongly agrees with the statement that, yeah, there's a station here that really, really gets me, is much more likely than everyone else to be a heavy user of radio, and probably a very heavy user of that specific radio station. So the better we understand her, the more consumption we'll get from her. So who is she? Well, she's single if she's between 15 and 24, and she's mostly married if she's 25 to 54. If she's 25 to 54, there's a 2 out of 3 chance that she has children. And if she has children, there are 1.85 of them living in her household. You know, where the other 15% of one child went, who knows. She's employed 50-50 if she's 25 to 54, but even 15 to 24s have a significant number of people with full-time jobs outside of the home. She's somewhat satisfied with the person she is right now. You see the pink bar here. Most women chose somewhat agree as their answer. So she's, you know, pretty satisfied, not totally. I suppose the best takeaway here, though, is that 85% of women are either somewhat or strongly satisfied with who they are right now. We asked for the first time ever, we asked, what kind of mood have you been in for the past month on a 1 to 10 scale or a 0 to 10 scale, with 0 being extremely concerned, worried, and stressed, and 10 is optimistic and positive. And you see here that most women are around a 7 on that scale, which is not euphoric, but it's a pretty good mood. And interestingly enough, we just thought we'd show this. Working mothers are in a slightly better mood than average women are, assumedly because they have both families and jobs, things to be happy about. Again, this year, we decided that we know that a great way to find out what's really important to someone is to give them a forced choice. You know, out of all of these possible choices, which one do you want most? The choices we gave them last year and this year are more time, more money, more sex more often, or a better relationship with your significant other. So 4 pretty important choices. And here's what she said. Well, my computer's a little delayed here. Let's see if we can get that to go. There we go. Immediately I hear some guys out there groaning. Sex more often was not important not the most important thing to very many women. A better relationship, a little bit more important. Maybe not as high as I would have guessed the first time I saw this. More time, was not the number one answer. That's the answer that most people guess would be number one. But it's number two with about 20% of the vote. Number one is, that's the only one left, more money. 60% of women say that given those choices, more money is the most important thing to her. And I mentioned everybody guesses that more time was the issue, is the issue. We think it was up till about 2008 or so. But since 2008, we've had a recession, high unemployment, stock market crash, housing crash, and just ongoing news about how bad the economy is doing. So money has emerged now as number one. This might be trying to read too many tea leaves, but the fact that's down about 9 points from last year, the optimistic interpretation of that is that a few more women are feeling a little bit better about their finances this year.
Alan, can I interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
Everyone, we are aware that there is a flicker on the screen on the right-hand side. We do apologize, and we are in contact with GoToWebinar to see if they can rectify it. So thank you for your patience, and bear with us, and we'll try to take care of that problem. Alan,
yeah, thanks, Jeff. It seemed like, I didn't know if anybody else was seeing that, but as we were doing our sort of dry runs earlier today, we noticed that GoToWebinar seems to be having a bandwidth issue today. So what is she doing more or less than she used to when it comes to media? Well, here you see that Facebook is not going away. You hear people occasionally say, I think fewer people are using Facebook. We don't see that. The net, 15 points more women are saying they're listening to more internet music streams than less. Nice to see that they feel like their listening, their usage of radio is up 6 points. And even better, I think, is the fact that their perceived radio usage is growing more than perceived Twitter usage. So, Twitter's one of the digital darlings right now, and radio, people seem to think they're using their radio use is growing more than their Twitter use. So that's good to see. So why do they listen, or why do they choose a favorite radio station? We gave them a lot of choices. Here's the answers. Well, obviously, since we're focused on the cumes of two music formats, information's not going to be a big reason. Something else, meaning things we didn't specifically ask them about 3%. The morning show. Morning show is the number one reason to choose your favorite radio station for 5% of these women. And then this year we gave them choice to say both the music and the morning show. And now when we do that, we see that to about 31% of all women, the morning show is part of the most important reason a station is their favorite radio station. So that's pretty significant. But as always, the number one answer is because of the music. Now, speaking of music, we gave these women a couple of statements. One, we gave them many statements. Here's two of them. One of them was, discovering new music is important to me. And you see here that 3/4 of the total said agreed with that, 75.9%. Another statement was, I often hear a song that is completely new to me on the radio. And almost exactly the same number of people agreed with that. And you see at the very bottom, the gap is only 1/10 of a point. So you could conclude from that in general, with 15 to 54s, radio is perceived to be giving them new music at about the same rate that it's important to them. But when you look at it by age, you see that on the extremes, 15 to 24, there's a 14-point gap there. 14 points more importance for music than actually hearing it. And on the opposite end, at 45 to 54, there's a significant gap in the other direction. They probably feel like they're hearing more new music than maybe they really want to. And of course, there's gaps at 25 to 34 and 35-44. They're a little smaller, but I think this intuitively makes sense to most people here. And new music versus older. let's look at this. Discovering new music is important. How many people said that versus how many people said today's music is not as good as the music was a few years ago, just some vague point in the past. Well, for the total sample, new music outpaces music from the past in terms of what's important and what was better. With 15 to 24, it's way ahead. With 35 to 44, the gap gets smaller. And then at 45 to 54, just by about 3 points, those women feel like today's music is not as good, and new music is less important, or important to fewer people. Nonetheless, I think a takeaway from this is that discovering new music is important to at least 2 out of 3 women, all the way up to 45 to 54. Now, we probe this every year. How are their attitudes toward radio? If you read consumer press and occasionally even industry press, you would think that radio's not doing real well. The important thing really is, how is it doing in the minds of the people we need to consume it? Now, I'm going to show you this. This year I put the word radio in quotation marks because that word is beginning to have pretty fuzzy connotations, and as a result, measuring attitudes toward, quote, radio is becoming difficult. It's just becoming fuzzy. For these reasons, radio has got different connotations. To some people, radio simply means a device, the box you use, or it used to be the only thing you used to pick up AM and FM signals. To other people, radio signifies a medium, an industry. And as I said, if you read the consumer press, a lot of people get the impression that radio is not doing well, not as important as it used to be. And to other people, to a lot of people, especially younger ones, radio now means any audio transmitted by somebody else. In other words, it didn't come from your own music collection. It came from someplace online. It's radio. So to them, actually, Pandora is radio. Now, I'll tell you that as we were asking specific questions about usage, we would make sure they knew what we were asking about. We would say, how much time or how often do you spend listening to AM, FM radio stations on a radio, or AM, FM radio stations online, or the online stream of AM, FM radio stations, or how often are you listening to AM, FM radio stations on your cell phone versus, we defined for them what customized or personalizable streams like Pandora were. So, we feel like on most of the questions, except possibly these, we nailed down. They know what we know what they meant when they told us something. But in these questions, so that we could trend them, we used the same language we used beginning 2 years ago. And what I'm going to do as we go through this today, is to show you some possible other interpretations of the statements that they saw and responded to. Okay? Here's the first one. I look forward to listening to the radio. Total agreement's down a little bit. Total disagreement is up a little bit. But, were they responding as though the question or the statement was, I look forward to listening to a radio? In other words, the specific device of radio? Well, they may be listening to it more online or on their cell now, so the importance of listening to it on our radio would logically be down somewhat. Next statement, I'd be very disappointed if I couldn't listen to radio anymore. And you see here that there is a downslope from left to right. There's a downtrend in agreement, an uptrend in disagreement with that statement, and strongly disagree took a big drop this year. So was that, I would be very disappointed if I couldn't listen to a radio, the device, anymore? Probably less disappointed than you used to be, because you can get it on your computer, and now a lot of people know they can get it on their cell phone. By the way, as you'd expect, there is a little bit of an age difference here. 15 to 24s are less likely to be disappointed if they couldn't listen to radio or a radio than 35 to 54s are. But again, that might have been listen to a radio anymore. Here's one we're not going to offer alternate wording for because it's just literally true if you think about it. Radio is kind of old. Online music is what's hot now. Okay, radio is chronologically absolutely old. It's the oldest electronic medium. Online music, especially once again, if you keep up with consumer press, you'd think that online music is the only thing that's hot right now. So total agreement going up and disagreement going down, I think makes complete sense there. And then here's the last one of these kinds of statements. I can foresee a day when I won't need or want to listen to music on the radio because I can get it online or on my phone. Well, as you see here, the agreement, especially the somewhat agreement, is going up. The disagreement took a big drop this year. But then again, this could be I can foresee a day when I won't need or want to listen to music on a radio because I can get radio online or on my phone. So if you take all of these statements at face value, you could conclude that radio's not doing well in terms of people's perception of it and how important to them it is. But I think once you look at it in context of the fact that the word radio is becoming fuzzy, I'm a lot less worried about it. In fact, the real bottom line is usage, what's happening with usage. And when we get there in a few seconds, we'll have a happy story to tell you. So every year we do take requests. We ask people if they have specific things they'd like to find out via this study, and this question was requested by Bob Pittman's office. Describe your relationship with your favorite station. Is it one of your best friends? Is it somebody you don't really care to know? Here are those answers. We'll get here. One of your best friends, that's nice. A good friend or companion, that's nice. An acquaintance, in other words, not terribly interested in, but, I know, the person, okay? That's a quarter of the people. And a few folks say someone you have no interest in knowing. So I think the good news here is that to a fair number of people, a radio station or radio, well, your favorite station is one of your best friends. And to 2/3 of all women, it's either a best friend or a really good friend. That's positive. Here's another thing that feels good. Most people on the radio sound like cool people at about the same frequency as last year. So to most folks, most people on the radio are cool folks. So moving into radio usage, told you that there was going to be a better story here. The first numbers you see are not going to look really happy and optimistic, but I promise you the story has a happy ending. So we asked people how often they did and used various media. Here's the daily and weekly answers, and you see that listening to radio on a radio is down this year compared to last year. Weekly numbers went from 95% to about 87%. At the same time, listening to custom music streams online has increased. So that doesn't look too good. Radio on a radio is down. Custom streams are online. Oh, goodness. The sky is falling, right? Not necessarily. Look at the increase of people listening to radio on their cell phone. And then the increase of people listening to the online stream of a radio station. So while listening on a radio looks like it's down a little bit, on a cell phone and on a computer is up. When we go over to TSL, television, and this is TSL among people who use or listen daily, television TSLs as a reference is exactly where it was last year. Facebook TSL's up a little bit. Listening to AM/FM radio stations on a radio has ticked down a little bit. And by the way, we round quarter hours just like Arbitron does. So this number could actually be maybe down 7.5 or 8 minutes. It's going to show up as a full quarter hour. But look at this. Look at the huge jump in the amount of time spent with the online stream daily of an AM or FM radio station. And the same kind of jump, a full hour, listening to AM or FM radio on your cell phone. Cell phone listening is becoming significant, as have, of course, just downloading apps in general. We've seen that the growth of apps in popularity is pretty phenomenal, and at this point, 90% of all women have ever downloaded any app to their phone. I'm sorry, that's 90% of all smartphone owners. Now, of that 90%, half of them basically have downloaded a radio station app specifically, with the result that 26%, and this number is 26% of the total sample, 26% listen to radio on the cell weekly, 13% listen to radio on a cell daily. I think that's a huge number, with a TSL of about an hour and 15 minutes. So here's our conclusion, and I told you this is the happy ending to this part of the story. Radio listening is not decreasing, it's shifting devices. Now, the way we come up with that conclusion is using percentages and TSLs, we've created a hypothetical community of 100 people. So 78% of this sample in that community would represent 78 women in that community. Here's daily listening to AM, FM radio, 2011 to 2012. On a radio, you see there are fewer people doing it daily and at about 1/4 hour less. So CUME times TSL gives you fewer quarter hours on a radio this year than last year. Well, now we add in listening to radio online. More people doing that for more quarter hours creates a big increase in that kind of quarter hour. And then we add in the people that are using cell phones to listen, 13% times 5 quarter hours. That adds a few more quarter hours. And then when we add those up, the 2012 quarter hours on a radio, online, or on a cell phone, and compare them to 2011, we see that the result is up slightly, up about 2%. Now, a study like this might have an error margin of plus or minus a couple of percent. So this could be flat, but it's not down. And more than likely, radio usage is up. And it makes sense. Most products enjoy increased consumption when they become available in more places. Wider distribution usually means wider consumption. And that's what I think we're seeing with radio. Radio is becoming more widely available in different places, so people are actually using it a little bit more, which is great. How's HD radio doing? We looked at awareness and usage of HD last year versus this year. Awareness is flat at about 1/4 of all women who've ever heard of HD on an aided, this is aided awareness. And then trial, only 4% of women say they've ever listened to HD radio, and that's flat too. So those, not big numbers and not much growth, that's not really good news. There's a little bit better news here. Among the 25% or so who've heard of HD, half of them can give you the correct answer when given a true or false. HD offers stations or channels that regular radio doesn't. About half of women can correctly answer that. That's flat compared to a year ago. But the other two statements have grown in comprehension. You have to buy a special radio. About half now know that that's the case. That's up versus a year ago. The low guy on the totem pole is up a small minority of women know that you don't have to pay a monthly fee. In other words, more than 2/3 of all women either think you have to pay a monthly fee or they don't know the answer to the question at all. Fortunately, that's up a little bit, so those are the two bright spots for HD radio. Now, here's something to think about. Is HD in our station's legal ID a good idea or not? We think it's contributing to possible confusion because we asked about HD radio listening 2 ways in 2 different places in the questionnaire. And when we ask if you've ever listened to HD radio, 3.8% of the women said they have. When the question was phrased as, have you ever listened to an HD radio station or channel, then almost 3 times as many, not a big number of women, but 3 times as many say they have. So it kind of seems like, whoops, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Our conclusion is that it's very possible that when radio stations say HD in their legal ID, some women get the impression that they are right then on a regular radio listening to HD radio, and that it's not really any different from regular radio. So right there, their mind goes into, I'm not really interested in HD radio, certainly not in paying money for one, because it's no different. So our thought is it's probably a better idea to occasionally explain that there are other programs and other options available on your HD channels that you can get if you have or if you go buy an HD radio, than to just say HD in your ID. Okay, and the bottom line on HD radio right now is that ownership is up a little bit, but it's still really low. We've got a long way to go. What formats are hot and not? In terms of cume among these 2,000 women, mainstream top 40 there on the left remains a monster, and the growth format right now in terms of cume is hot AC. Mainstream AC is holding its own, and Rhythmic Top 40 is as well at a lower level. When we look at P1s, once again, Mainstream Top 40 is the gorilla in the room. Hot AC is growing. Mainstream AC is holding its own, which I think will surprise a few people. And Rhythmic Top 40 is eroding here in most places except the West Coast. And this data was gathered in May, and this week you're seeing in the trade stories about what phenomenal Junes Mainstream Top 40 and Hot AC had. Absolutely, we're seeing the same thing here. Okay, moving into morning radio specifically, we asked, what time do you normally wake up? This is going to be a series about how does her day start, when does it start, and what does she do? And how does radio fit into that? Well, what time do you wake up? The average among all these women is 7 a.m., and that's a little later than you might have guessed, partly because of the younger part of the sample. We saw that last year and again this year, the college-age women wake up latest of all demographics, and so they're, of course, included in this average here. Heavy radio users get up earlier in the morning. People with jobs get up another quarter hour earlier, and earliest of all are the working moms. They got a job to get to, and they've got kids to take care of, so they have to get up earlier. So depending on who you are, it's between 6:15 and 7 on an average. So how do they wake up? What or who wakes them up in the morning? Those of us who've been in the business for quite a long time, may carry a stereotype that women, not just listeners, but that people in general still wake up to clock radios. You set your alarm for 6 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock the radio station comes on. Well, we wanted to check and see if that's still the case. So not many people wake up to television as an alarm. A few people wake up because their boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, whatever calls them. A few folks wake up some other method. I'm having real trouble figuring out or imagining what those might be. Here we get to clock radio. Basically only 1 out of 11 or 12 people now wake up to a clock radio in the morning. Somebody else in the home, a little higher number. 1 out of 5 people manage to wake up on their own. And God, I wish I could do that. Here's alarm clocks, and then the number one answer is 1/3 of all women wake up to an alarm on their cell. So compare that to the 8.8% who wake up to clock radios. And you'll see that the playing field certainly has shifted over the past, let's say, decade or so. And now the number one way to wake up is an alarm on your cell. Just an observation, most of the radio station apps that I have seen have alarm functions on them. But I don't think I've ever heard a radio station morning show talk about that function. I have not heard, but someone else I know, other people I know have heard and seen television stations talking about their alarm function in the manner of, for example, set your TV5 app to wake you up tomorrow morning, and we'll give you all the information you need to start your day. I think radio needs to be doing that. So now that you're awake, what's the first thing you want to hear? Now, we didn't ask, what do you want on a radio station? We asked a wider question. What do you want to see, hear, or read when you first wake up? In other words, what's the first piece of stimulation or information you want to get? Numbers from the bottom up. Well, a few people really want Hollywood or celebrity gossip. Local traffic when you first wake up isn't a big deal. News is a little more important. Now, this was daily reminders or reminders of what you have to do today. Well, there's a few people who'd like to kind of wake up and be reminded of what's going on, maybe as a way to help them get out of bed. People having fun, a little growth there. Interesting conversation, well, that's stimulating. Weather forecast becomes one of the bigger items. Oddly enough, softer music shows up pretty high. Didn't expect this, but softer music can mean different things to different people. But actually here over, let's see, that's 60, 70, that's over 2/3 of all women said softer music is desirable in the morning. Now, this was the surprise, the real surprise to me. The number 3 most desirable thing in the morning when you first wake up is something motivating or inspirational. And when we finish this list, I'm going to come back to that for a second because I think there's a couple of ways to interpret that. Number 2 on the list is something funny, and number 1 is upbeat music. So, we see that upbeat music is positive or desirable to about 83 or 4%. And 60, 70% of women say softer music. So there are women who said both of those things were important to them in the morning. But upbeat music wins. Something funny is big. So they're telling us, and we've seen this in other ways, and we saw it in verbatims last year, that what they need in the morning is they need motivation and stimulation. They need energy. So that something motivational or inspirational could be taken as literally verbal encouragement or inspiration, or it may, to other people, mean I just need energy, stimulation in terms of interesting conversation, people saying funny things and upbeat music here. And that's part of the art of radio, is for people to decide how to provide that something motivational or inspirational. Her morning is very time-pressed. She doesn't give herself much time. Among employed women who wake up at 6:15 in the morning, their average time to leave for work is 7:30, so an hour and 15 minutes to do a lot of stuff. Here's what she does in the morning before leaving home. Number 1 is making breakfast for herself. Number 2, turn on a television. Grr. Check emails. Wake up the kids. Take care of a pet or 2. Go online for something other than email. Make breakfast for others, including the kids, the husband. Dress the kids. Do some kind of household chore. Start a load of laundry. Get out of the freezer what you want to thaw for dinner tonight. And check Facebook shows up. Finally, we get down to turning on a radio. And that's I think we'd all like to see that number higher. So why isn't it higher? Why don't you listen to radio in the morning before leaving home? Here are the reasons. Don't want the kids listening to my station because, I listen to something that's got bad lyrics or bad language. I don't like the lyrics or language. Too much news and information, not many people cite that. Not enough news, about the same number of people cite that. There's nobody interesting on the stations I like, few folks say that. The music is too loud and noisy for early in the morning. Don't have a radio at home. Boy, we might need to remind them they can listen on their app on their cell phone. The people are too loud and noisy for early morning. Still not a great big number. Not enough music. Some people think that's important. Here we go into I get what I need on my phone or online. Here comes television. There's more or better information on television. And we may not be able to do anything about that because music radio ceded the information service to television a long, long time ago, and they're taking advantage of it by doing things like starting their news at 4:30 in the morning. Here's the number 2 reason. It just doesn't occur to me to turn it on. Number 1, I don't have time. I'm too busy. And I don't know about you, but my reaction when I saw that was, are you kidding me? You don't have time to press one button in the morning while you're running around the house? Well, don't take these answers too literally. People make time for what's important to them. Yes, we just saw that she's very important in the morning. She has a lot to do and doesn't give herself much time to do it, so she's really busy. But people make time for what's important to them. So we haven't given her enough compelling reasons to turn us on. We haven't become important enough. And then just doesn't occur to me to turn it on. That fits the same reason. Well, you know, they didn't do anything yesterday or the day before to make me go, wow, I got to listen to those guys again today. And also, radio is an industry, you know, as revenue took a big drop, our marketing budgets took a proportionate or more than proportionate drop. And the less we market radio stations, the less people see and hear and get reminded of radio. So our share of mind has dropped. So a couple of things we need to do. Most importantly is our content needs to get better. We need to be giving people more compelling content. And if you, as a station or a morning show, provide more compelling content, the first thing that's going to happen, even before you get people who don't even use morning radio to listen to you, is more of the people who do listen to morning radio will listen to you. Your share will go up, and maybe as a bonus, you'll get some people to start listening to radio in the morning. So we've seen what time she wakes up. What is the time that she first turns on a radio on average, typical weekday? We looked at employed and working moms because they're both pretty important groups to female-targeted radio stations. Well, she wakes up at 6:30 if she's employed, 6:15 if she's got a job. Her first radio is not till 7:45 or 7:30. And in both cases, that's an hour and 15 minutes of lost listening. Let's take that as an opportunity. There's an hour and 15-minute opportunity to improve the usage of radio, or at least your station, in the morning. Heavy morning listeners are really important because they listen to a lot of radio overall. The slide here shows that if you don't listen to any radio between 5:30 and 9 in the morning, you know, your total radio usage is about an hour 15 per day. If you listen to morning radio but not as much as an hour or not over an hour, you listen to a little bit more radio. But if you're the kind of person who likes to listen to radio in the morning for what it's doing then, you tend to be a pretty heavy user of the medium. I think we saw that an hour 45 was the total sample average TSL to radio. Here, heavy morning users, it's 2.5 hours. So those people are very important. Here's how important they are to a morning show. How much do you listen to morning radio? An hour or less? An hour or more? None. The people, there's only 26% of them who listen to an hour or more, but look at this number. They wind up generating 90% of morning radio quarter hours. So we may not want to cater to the woman who's just in and out in 15 minutes, although her durations may be several durations of 15 minutes. The people who are heavier listeners an hour or more on a typical day, those are the people that really determine morning show ratings. Speaking of heavy consumers, we'll kind of move in that direction now and look at, radio's best customers, the people who use radio the most. We define them as people who listen more than 1 hour per day to radio on a radio. And here's what they show us. Those people listen an average. Remember, the minimum is 1 hour. The average is 3 hours a day. Everybody else gives radio 45 minutes a day on average. So you can see how important these heavy listeners are. They really drive all the ratings. So if they're that important, how do we find them? How do we identify them? How do we appeal to them? Well, we set up indexes here comparing heavy listeners to light listeners. And the higher the number you see, the bigger the difference, the more heavy listeners are like that than our light listeners. So first of all, the differences they're not demographic. It's not so much whether you've got children at all or at home. It's not by age. It's not by marital status. It's not so much whether you own a smartphone or not. The biggest differences, and the first one I think is really important, the biggest differences are she likes that her opinion matters. Heavy listeners are 86% more likely to say, I really like it that my opinion matters. And we're going to show that statement, that sense, that mindset for women show up another time in an equally important place. She tends to spend more time in a car. That makes logical sense. She thinks that most air talent sound like cool people. She feels like there's at least one radio station that really understands her. Again, another statement about air personalities. Some of them are entertaining. As we mentioned, her daily TSL to morning radio is a big difference. Other differences, let me back up here. Let me back up one slide. So there's the biggest differences. She wants to feel like her opinion matters and that she is understood by the radio station she listens to. She spends a lot of time in her car, and she likes air personalities. Those are the biggest ones. Other differences, she tends to turn on the radio before she leaves home. She feels like her favorite station is one of her best friends. She does like contests and games more than other folks do, and has participated in a contest in the past year. Likes to wake up to fun or funny. Radio is the music source at work. So now we found who the heavy listeners are. Let's look at Arbitron respondents for just a second here. Some people still try to identify likely Arbitron respondents in their research or marketing so that they can appeal to or market to them. So how realistic is that as a strategy? Well, let's compare a couple of numbers here. For people who we did a couple of things. We described the process of keeping a listening diary and asked people how likely they would be, if they were asked to do that, how likely would they be to do it? We also asked if they had ever been asked that question before, and if so, did they do it? Well, the very likely number is almost identical to the actual number who did in diary markets. All right, so it may be reasonable to try to identify likely diary keepers. When we look at PPM markets, though, we see that there's a big difference. Only about 60% as many people actually agreed to carry a meter as said they were likely to carry a meter. So PPM recruits are much more likely to say they'll cooperate than to actually do it. So, the suggestion here, I think the conclusion is, it's a lot less efficient to try to identify likely meter carriers in PPM markets than it is to find likely diary keepers in diary markets. And our final question here, why do you cooperate with Arbitron? Or why do you cooperate to keep a diary or carry a meter? This is a 2-year answer here. Last year and this year, we asked the question, have you ever done either one of those things? And between the 2 years, we found 179 actual respondents. We asked them, why did you do that? And you see here the number one answer is for money, points, or rewards. And as you look at that, keep in mind that when we asked women what they wanted most was more money. So let's say if you're going to give away money, you now are appealing to what women want most and to the motivation for Arbitron respondents. Number two answer is she likes having her opinion matter. We just saw that show up for heavy listeners. So if you solicit and convince your audience that what they think about you matters and has an effect on you, you're becoming more attractive to not only heavier radio listeners, but also likely Arbitron respondents.
Okay, thanks, Alan. We've got a bunch of questions here that we want to spend some time addressing. And again, if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to address them in the dialog box on your control panel or on Twitter, hashtag BurnsStudy, and we're monitoring that. Alan, I think you've got the first question there.
Yeah. Here's one. If the average woman doesn't wake up until 6:30 or 7, why do I need to have my morning show on the air so far in advance of that? I think it's a logical question. And there's two parts to the answer. The average means that roughly half of them are awake before that time. That's part one. Part two is that earlier listeners, we saw this in last year's study if you were there for that, earlier listeners tend to be heavier listeners. So when you look at an average, know that about half of the women are awake before that time. You don't want to miss half of them. And you certainly don't want to miss the earlier half because they are heavier listeners. So thanks for that question.
Okay, I've got another one here. You mentioned in the study that 26% listen to radio on cell phone, and I do think that was weekly. So the question is that of people that have downloaded an app?
Oh, sorry, Jeff, was that a question for me?
Well, you're the boss.
Okay. Yes. 26% of the total sample listen to radio weekly on their cell phone. So that's not a percentage just of women who have apps. Now, one of the things, by the way, next week we're going to take a really close look at all things digital that affect radio. And one of the things we're going to see is that while listening via an app accounts for most radio listening on cell, it doesn't account for all of it. There are some people who actually have a phone with an activated radio chip in it, and you can also pull up a radio station's online stream via the browser on your phone.
Now, another question here in regard to people that wake up to cell phones. Again, I think it was over 33%. Was there any bias on demo breakout, young versus old, on that? I don't have those breakouts in front of me. Do you remember, Alan?
I don't have them in front of me, but I know that we're planning to talk about that in both the AC and the CHR presentations, which are 2 and 3 weeks from now, respectively. And the basic answer is, yeah, there is a little bit of an age bias with younger people, a little more likely to listen on their cell phone, but it's not as dramatic as you might think. So here's a question. Is there a possibility that more money, which is what people said they wanted most, may equal more time if she's working 2 jobs or working overtime? Is more money really a way to say that she wants better things for her and her family? Well, that's maybe slightly 2 different questions. Is it a possibility that she means more time if she's working 2 jobs? Well, it's a possibility, but she had the opportunity to say more time directly, so we think that she really means more money. Now, Molly, if you go back to that question, I want to address the second half of it. Is more money really a way to say she wants better things for her and her family? This would only be a guess, but yeah, I think that's probably true. More money usually, as they say, more money money doesn't buy happiness, but it can rent a lot of it. So, yes, you can buy more time with money. You can buy better clothes, et cetera, et cetera. So yes. Someone here, not so much a question. Is there a demo bias or breakdown on waking to an alarm on your cell phone? I don't recall the answer to that, but we will get to it as we talk about CHR and AC. That person, that's Dave Dillon. Thanks, Dave. Dave notes that Channel 13 in Houston is pushing their Wake Up Alarm Clock app big time. So another example of television's way ahead of us in terms of reminding people that they can listen or watch on their cell phone via the app. I really think we got to get busy on that.
Another person asked if we noticed any change in shared listening among women 45-54 with the classic hits or oldies station. And I don't think we noticed any dramatic shift in that demo.
I don't retain an impression of that. We've got that data. Don't think we have. It certainly didn't strike either one of us as big enough to call attention to. So no, there must not have been. Although we can go back and look. And if whoever asked that question wants to, and by the way, anybody can do this. If you have a question we don't get to, you're welcome to email Jeff or I, jeff@burnsradio.com, or Alan, A-L-A-N, @burnsradio.com with your question. We'll be happy to answer it. Or call us. We're at 251-980-7070. So let's see. Here's, you say more women are listening to AM/FM on cells and online. So are those women still listening to their local stations or listening to AM/FM stations in other cities? That's sort of asking for a little bit of a sneak peek at a piece of data from next week, but I'll go ahead and do it. As I recall, by the way, we're going to answer questions like that in detail next week, but as I recall, I think only about 5% of the women who listen to radio were listening to stations in other cities. It's a smaller number than I would have guessed, but that's the number. That's the reality for right now.
Someone also mentions that Channel 7 in ABC in Chicago is promoting their alarm app on for the cell phones as well. So it seems like TV is doing a lot more than we are right now. Well, I'm actually kind of proud of somebody. Somebody has in the dialogue box told us that since this webinar started, they have now written liners for their morning show to talk about their app. Very good, very good. So next week, as I mentioned, we're going to be getting into the digital battleground. How are radio's digital efforts faring? What's happening with Pandora? Is that killing radio listening? What's going to happen to radio as people get our in-car internet access more and more? How do we increase traffic to radio's websites? We'll be getting into all of that and much more, everything digital related to radio next week, and that'll be at 3:30 Eastern on Thursday, as all of these webinars are. So a lot of information we just threw at you. So first of all, again, thank you for being patient with that flicker. It drove me crazy, and we're going to have GoToWebinar reimburse each and every one of you for the money that you spent on this, and promise it won't be there next week. We did send. I have a lot of data. We will make this slide deck available via a PDF file on our website, burnsradio.com. We'll give Molly a chance to breathe and upload it, so if you could wait till tomorrow morning to do so, we'd appreciate it. But it will be available tomorrow morning, the slide deck for this one, and then for each subsequent one the following Friday, the slide deck will be available. So again, thank you for your time, everyone. We appreciate your attention and would love the feedback, and we look forward to seeing everyone again next week.
Thanks, everybody.